So the next two are our top two most common questions. They're kind of a toss-up. So we'll start with what we have on our list in this order is, well, how much is it going to cost me to open a cannabis business?
Well, I think that on that end where, we're a business decision, we're a part of the cog. There's architects, engineers, contractors, marketing, CPAs, HR. There's so many different pieces of the puzzle that you or somebody that you're working with or your company needs to figure out. And so part of that is doing your due diligence and figuring out the numbers, figuring out what the market value is of the property where you might want to be purchasing or leasing. You want to figure out the price per pound. You want to figure out how much legal services cost, how much a knowledgeable architect and engineer are actually going to cost, and then really create that pro forma, figure out your expenses and your capital operating, throughout that year and beyond, because it all depends.
There are, over 15 different types of cannabis licenses for 15 different types of cannabis businesses. They're all very different from one another. 15 might not be it, I didn't actually count them. But you should, you don't have to make a formal business plan, but you should have a general idea of what kind of business you want to open. Well, I want to be a grower. Okay, how large of a grower? How many plants do I need to grow? What's my cultivation style? Do I know how to grow, or do I have to find someone who does? You don't need to go pay a professional to tell you how to run a business. You should think about why you want to run this business in the first place and think about how the cost to get you there. In general, this is, in my experience, a very expensive procedure, and we're just a small piece of it, like Nick said. But it's not an unsurmountable amount for most groups of people with, the resources to start a new business. I don't think anything about a cannabis business is inherently more expensive than a similar, type of industry business would be, with the caveat that cannabis laws are complicated and constantly changing, and that certainly adds cost and risk. The ability for municipalities to really limit the people who can pursue these businesses create a lot of cost and risk, especially if you're in competitive situations. But when you assume that you need to pass a state background check, that's a pretty easy amount of work that you can estimate how much time it's going to cost you. You need to find a municipality that's going to allow you to open a business. Well, you got to find a location. You need to get the community's permission to operate the type of business you want. So that implies you need a location. It implies you need to get permission from the community through a business licensing process. And then when you have both of those things, you need to actually build your business. So, a cultivation facility is going to be likely more expensive to build out than a retail store, but a cultivation facility is going to be a lot less competitive to obtain. So, there really isn't a number we throw out, because, if you're in a position where you're lucky enough to already have a location, then that could be a huge amount of savings for you. If you have some sort of skill set where you don't have to pay someone to do it for you, it's going to be a huge amount of savings for you. But start to finish, it's certainly not something that the average person does by themselves, but you get a group of motivated people with funds to dedicate to the project, and it is certainly not just for the the one percenters of the world. You can do this with a reasonable amount of assets. Now, we know that a reasonable amount of assets quickly approaches funds in the $500,000 to $1 million range or more sometimes. Now, that's a lot of money for any one person, I'm sure, but it's not an impossible amount of money. What really makes the costs much more poignant in the cannabis space is lack of access to traditional banking services. You can't utilize a mechanism such as a mortgage to purchase property, because banks don't want to put a mortgage on location that is for known cannabis use. You can't get a business loan. Banks don't want to give a loan to a federally illegal project. So the numbers themselves don't strike me as exorbitantly high, but it does kind of create some barriers that a lot of groups aren't going to be able to pass unless they have either independent wealth or someone who's willing to be an investor in them that has access to independent wealth to spend on these projects.
And I think another thing to think about too, just to kind of piggyback off of what Travis said, was when you're looking for that local approval and you need to find that property, whether you're buying it or leasing it, obviously the market, if you are a property owner in a green zone, suitable location, you are within your right to demand more, because that is more in demand for that location. So you already know, regardless of what the municipality is going to set up as that process, you're going to be paying a pretty penny for that location, for that lease, so on and so forth. But really the other things to kind of think about is, okay, am I going into a municipality that's kind of a check the box requirements where, okay, we submit a 2-page application, verify that the site is okay, give you some plans, and then you take it through your own review process, and then you give us a license? Is it a lottery where we kind of have to check the boxes and then kind of leave it up to chance? Maybe go a little bit more above and beyond than a check the box application, but it's still kind of, we don't have to put our full effort into it to try to win this. But then on the other hand, probably the most costly way of doing things that municipalities are doing, not only in Michigan but across the United States, is the competitive merit-based application process, similar to Pontiac, similar to Lansing, some other ones that are coming on board now that are kind of adopting that process, requires applicants to go so far above and beyond what the state would require you to do a license, and it's within their realm to do that because cities and towns have control to, create those rules and I don't want to call them hurdles, but just requirements in order for them to feel comfortable and vet you and give you approval to do that. And I think knowing that it's competitive, they want to select the best and do their due diligence to actually select them. So they make you, spend time, money, effort, resources in providing these novels of applications to try to show them like, hey, we want to be here. This is what we're providing, so on and so forth. And we've seen on our end, and I'm sure on both locally, within the state and nationwide, that those can be costly just because many people want to be especially in big markets.
And usually you see different competition levels for different license types. I think we can all agree that the retail, be it a medical provisioning center, an adult use marijuana retailer, is the type of competition where you see the largest amount of interested parties for the smallest amount of slots. Like how many provisioning center applications did they get in Pontiac, Nick?
104.
104
for 20 spots, and they were separated by different districts, and one of them had almost half of them. So you're playing the percentages, you're wagering on the locations being scarce or.
So if you're competing against 100 other applicants for 20 slots and you're trying to win, you can easily see how you might be dedicating resources to be as competitive as possible. Whereas if you're a grow facility in a community with no caps, you hit all the boxes you're supposed to hit, and as long as the municipality likes you and you do everything they ask of you, you're probably going to get your license for pennies on the dollar compared to a Pontiac
and it's
situation.
all relative. I mean, it's still a tall order compared to even out of our pockets. It's a lot to liquid funds just to be putting down on purchase agreements, application fees, legal fees, architectural fees, so on and so forth. And then I guess the other thing to go along with that, what application type is, what am I doing? Like you mentioned, your grow methods, your processing methods. Am I just a kitchen, or am I buying a bunch of ethanol distillation chemistry material to actually do that, versus do I just need an oven and some baking sheets? And that all depends, because especially when we get asked these questions, we're not really familiar with what you might want to do, and you might not know that either. So it's hard to say, well, it costs this much, because it probably won't, based on how many other different things we're not sure of, or you're not even sure of until they become to your